The gel's entity. This is a novel theory explaining how consciousness emerges in the human brain. The term gel's entity refers to a group of entities that act like a single entity. An individual cell of a multicellular organism has perceptual awareness as long as it is not considered dead. That is, at the basic level it must possess a property of perceptual awareness with respect to itself. Then, the research explores the origin through which full consciousness is aroused or emerged in the human brain. At the basic level, each cell of our body has its own perceptual awareness until it is considered a dead cell. Some cells or parts of our body, such as skin, kidney, liver, etc., can be transferred from one body to another, where they can remain alive, survive, and function in the new body in the same way as they did before. This means that, at a basic level, each cell in our body has its own perceptual awareness or self-perception. Since a cell from a multicellular organism can be transferred from one body to another while continuing to survive and function in the same way, this indicates that the cell possesses its own distinct identity and perceptual awareness. In multicellular organisms, cells are organized into different groups, which then divide into various subgroups and further into sub-subgroups, functioning in a hierarchical and specialized manner. The extent to which this basic level of perceptual awareness in any individual cell of a multicellular organism will ultimately reach a level of self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness depends on its position, the type and amount of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information. According to this theory, each cell possesses a basic level of perceptual awareness, which eventually, at some stage, emerges or transforms into self-perception or self-awareness or full consciousness. Nothing separate is being imposed in the brain or nothing supernatural is happening in our brain. It is universally recognized that a person's consciousness is emerged or generated in their brain. However, different groups of people have their own distinct mechanisms of belief, and in general, the other parts of our body function like assistants to that conscious brain. According to this theory, when certain cells of a multicellular organism, that has basic level of perceptual awareness, work together and exchange information, which enable the groups to function, a comparatively higher level of self-perception or self-awareness or full consciousness, can emerge within each cell of that group, arising from the basics perceptual awareness of those individual cells. However, these cells might be a primary level subgroup. We call that group a gel's entity, a group of entities that act like a single entity, where each group possesses its own world or realm of self-perception / self-awareness / consciousness. Through analysis, we have found that all parts of a living human body are divided into different gels entities, each possessing its own world. Through further analysis, we have found that the human brain is also divided into different gels entities, where each gels entity has its own world or realm of self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness. The emergence of self-perception / self-awareness / consciousness / full consciousness of their world is determined by its location, the nature and amount of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information with some other related factors while these are precisely calculated. Let's say a little girl whose name is Raisa. If Raisa is represented by R, and we assume that n number of neuron cells of her pulvinar together form Raisa's gels entity that is denoted by Raisa R, which is maintaining specialized communication with the outside world. Now, the gels entity of Raisa R, which maintains specialized communication with the outside world, is recognized, understood, and communicated with the outside world as that very Raisa. The existence of everything else related to Raisa's other gels entities, except pulvinar, is not significant to the outside world. According to the research, multiple neuron cells of the pulvinar, some particular cells, have collectively created a gels entity of Raisa R, which is maintaining specialized communication with the outside world and carries out various associated functions. Simultaneously, this gels entity of Raisa R is maintaining communication with the inside of the body and other brain areas, while also performing various related tasks. Here, if n number of neuron cells together form that Raisa's gels entity Raisa R, which is maintaining specialized communication with the outside world, then all R1 to Rn will collectively function as the said gels entity, Raisa R. This is illustrated in the figure 1. Since it is receiving and communicating information from various parts of the brain, it can participate in different tasks accordingly, and this gels entity Raisa R is interacting with the external world as the true representation of Raisa. Here, each R1 to Rn is an individual Raisa, but they are unable to perceive their individuality because they function collectively as a gels entity, since they all, R1 R2 up to Rn, operate within the same system and information framework. There is almost no difference in their realms of perception. This is one of the most significant aspects of this theory. There is no unusual thing separately imposed here in the brain, and no supernatural thing is happening in the brain. This diagram, figure 1, can be referred to for better understanding of the concept. The main parts of the cortical and subcortical areas are shown in this diagram. Here, different functional parts are cerebrum, corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, septum, thalamus, pulvinar, pons, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, spinal cord, midbrain, or mesencephalon, AC for anterior commissure, IC for inferior colliculus, SC for superior colliculus, HT for hypothalamus, OC for optic chiasm, PB for pineal body, and PG for pituitary gland shown in the figure. Raisa R1, R2, up to Rn are present here in the green area of the pulvinar. R1, R2, up to Rn are some specific cells of the pulvinar. All of them think that she is Raisa and that she is unique. The basic level of perceptual awareness of an individual neuron of R1, R2, up to Rn, RACA R, of that gel's entity will ultimately reach a level of self-perception or self-awareness or full consciousness depends on the amount and type of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information. The fascinating thing is that while each of us thinks we are an individual entity, making decisions, or acting independently, but the reality is something else entirely. It's actually the gel's entity in action. An individual, R1 or R2 or R3 etc. is a part of that activity. The action comes from the collective output of R1, R2, up to Rn. In the next episode, we will describe it in more detail, along with the advantages from the functional perspective, and we will make a comparison to the AI neural network as well. RACA R, R1 to Rn, are present in the pulvinar. It has shown in the green area of the figure 1. All of them think that she is RACA and that she is unique. It needs to be made clear that each individual R1 to Rn thinks she is RACA, independently making decisions and acting independently. However, an individual, R1 or R2 or R3, etc. is a part of that activity. The action comes from the collective output of R1 R2 to Rn. If the sum of excitatory and inhibitory signals, weighted inputs, from interneurons reaches to the threshold value, the neuron fires. Otherwise, output neurons remain inactive. As the activities of RACA are, that is, the activities of all individual R1 to Rn lie within the same information and structure, all R1 to Rn therefore go through almost the same feeling, with self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness or full consciousness. Therefore, whether the summation value may reach or may not reach the threshold, it does not affect to an individual's perception of R1 to Rn. It seems to them that it is each of their own individual and independent decision. On the other hand, from the perspective of communication with the outside world, RACA is a combination of R1 to Rn. That means RACA R is a gel's entity in the pulvinar. A person from the outside world does not realize the existence of individual entities R1 to Rn. They communicate with the gel's entity of RACA R, where the gel's entity is a group of entities that act like a single entity. This theory is not concerned with what occurs inside an individual living neuron cell or an individual living cell. This theory is concerned on biological neural network in the human brain, where the basic level of perceptual awareness of an individual neuron R1 to Rn of that gel's entity will ultimately reach a level of self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness or full consciousness depends on the amount and type of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information. However, they work collectively and act as a gel's entity, which is a group of entities that act like a single entity. Here we put emphasis on the word, like, that is, it seems so, but actually it is not the fact. Just imagine, I'm alone in a room, watching a live football match on a large TV screen. If the power goes out or signal transmission stops, or I fall into a deep sleep, what happens is simply an interruption in the flow of information. An even more serious thing we might consider is that if a living person has no information or memory, and lacks the ability to analyze information, he will just pass through the flow of the present, retaining only a basic level of a perceptual awareness of self-existence, where there is no existence of past and future to himself. A living person's brain neuron cells are divided into different groups and subgroups, each of which possesses its own world or realm of self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness or full consciousness, which is depending upon its location, the nature and amount of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information. Accordingly, each living brain neuron cell has its own world or realm of self-perception or self-awareness or consciousness or full consciousness, which depends on its location, the nature and amount of information it receives, and its ability to exchange information. Along with some other related factors, while these all are precisely calculated. We are going to upload our presentation on YouTube in 4 parts. This presentation is part 1. Within the next few weeks, we will upload part 2, part 3, and part 4. In those parts 2, 3, and 4, we will present a. Some human brain neural network functions, b. Analysis between AI and biological neural networks, and most importantly, c. Supporting evidence for this theory. Thanks for watching.